Alfred is a subject matter expert working around prevent youth from encountering lifelong challenges he's faced. Currently, Alfred battles extensive chronic health conditions that resulted from generational and lifelong history of trauma and adversity that had begun before he was born. Alfred has been diagnosed with liver cancer and is awaiting a liver transplant. He also has fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and is a series of other health conditions. The trauma impacting Alfred's mind, body, and soul manifested in his life as substance abuse, homelessness, and criminality. Despite the extensive difficulty on top of the intergenerational trauma and early adversity, Alfred demonstrates a great deal of hope and resilience. Alfred's unique experiences have provided him with valuable insights into supporting youth who've been impacted similarly in their lives. And since 2004, Alfred has received his master's degree in ministry and psychology and is now a licensed psychotherapist who has dedicated his life to helping others heal. So with that, I'm going to pull up his presentation, and then Alfred, I'll let you kind of share more once we get into the presentation. Hold on one second here. Let me try to get this screen share. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, you're on the sort of presenter view though, right now?
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it keeps giving me that one.
There we go.
That works?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So we kind of covered this already. There'll be some Q&A sessions at the end of the presentation. You will also receive a copy of the slide deck that we're going to be sharing today and some flyers of the things that some of the projects and the programs that Alfred is working on. And then I can also send you a recording of the session today as well. So this is what we just read. And then Alfred, I'm gonna give it to you to get into the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alfred White, and I'm the founder and executive director of the League of Extraordinary People. And this is our mission and vision. Our mission is to launch an educational and spiritual enrichment revolution to build hope, resilience, and healing through community empowerment. And our vision is to establish a transformational, integrative, and replicable self-healing center of extraordinary people. This residential community model will heal transgenerational trauma through a foundation of safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, peer support, collaboration, and mutuality, empowerment of voice and choice, and purposefully elevating historical, ethnic. Curtis.
Yep.
No, I can't see the bottom end of it.
Right. And cultural legacies, ethnic and cultural legacies.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next slide. So today's topic is going to be on epigenetics and the vagus nerve and the neurobiological impact of trauma on Black bodies. This is really, really important, you guys. I really like this subject matter, and I want to go into this in depth. Next slide, please. So I want to go to this in depth. How many people are familiar with My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa? Anybody?
I am.
You are? Only one?
No, Nicola raised her hand too.
Okay then, okay. I think that's Nyla. Nyla. So for the past, what I want to do is I want to read a quote because I need to set this up, you guys. This is not just something that you can just start talking about. And I need to set this up so we can understand what has happened to the Black community and really, I'm really focusing on the Black community because of enslavement. And for me, that's the original sin. So it says, what is epigenetics and how does it relate to childhood development? Epigenetics is an emerging area of scientific research that shows how environmental influences children's experiences actually affect the expression of their genes. This means the old idea that genes are set in stone has been disproven. This is very important here, you guys. Nature versus nurture is no longer a debate. It's nearly always both. And during development, the DNA that makes up our genes accumulates chemical marks that determine how much or little of the genes is expressed. This collection of chemical marks is also known as epigenome, and the different experiences children have can rearrange those chemical marks. This explains why genetically identical twins can exhibit different behaviors, skills, health, and achievement. And so I want to share a quote out of Resman's book, and this is the chapter on your body and the brain. And he explains, he says, for the past 3 decades, we've earnestly tried to address white body supremacy in America with reason, principles, and ideas, usually dialogue, forums, discussions, education, and mental training. But the widespread destruction of Black bodies continues, and some of the ugliest destruction originates with our police. Why is there such a chasm between our well-intentioned attempts to heal and the ever-growing number of dark-skinned bodies who are killed or injured, sometimes by police officers? Well, it's not that we've been lazy or insincere, but we focus our efforts in the wrong direction. We tried to teach our brains to think better about race, but white body supremacy doesn't live in our thinking brains. It lives and breathes in our bodies, folks. Our bodies have a form of knowledge that is different from our cognitive brains. This knowledge is typically experienced as a felt sense of constriction or expansion, pain or ease, energy or numbness. Often this knowledge is stored in our bodies as wordless stories about what is safe and what is dangerous. The body is where we fear, hope, and react, where we constrict and release, and where we reflexively flee, fight, flee, or freeze. If we are to upend the status quo of white body supremacy, we must begin with our bodies, you guys. New advances in psychobiology reveal that our deepest emotions, love, fear, anger, dread, grief, sorrow, disgust, and hope, involve the activation of our bodily structures. I really want to focus on this. It says that new advances in psychobiology reveal that our deepest emotions, love, fear, anger, dread, grief, sorrow, disgust, and hope, involve the activation of our bodily structures. These structures, a complex system of nerves, connect the brainstem, the pharynx, the heart, the lungs, the stomach, the gut, and spine. Neuroscience calls this system the wandering nerve or our vagus nerve. A more apt name might be our soul nerve. The soul nerve is connected directly to a part of our brain that doesn't use cognition or reasoning as its primary tool for navigating the world. This is very important, you guys, in our study of epigenetics here today. And our soul nerve also helps mediate between our bodies, activating energy and resting energy. This part of our brain is similar to the brains of lizards, birds, and lower mammals. Our lizard brain only understands survival and protection. That's real important, you guys. Our lizard brain only understands survival and protection. At any given moment, it can use one of a handful of survival commands, and that's only a handful: rest, fight, flee, or freeze. These are the only commands it knows and the only choices it's able to make. You want to make that real clear. The only choices it's able to make for themselves. White body supremacy is always functioning in our bodies. It's the template that we live by. It operates in our thinking brains and our assumptions, expectations, and mental shortcuts. It operates in our muscles, nervous system, and it routinely creates constriction. But it operates most powerfully in our lizard brains. Our lizard brain cannot think. It is reflexively protective and it is strong. It loves whatever it feels will keep us safe, and it fears and hates whatever will do us harm. All our sensory input has to pass through the reptilian part of our brain before it reaches the cortex where we think and reason. The reason why I'm explaining that to you guys is because a lot of us who are people of color and grew up in the Black community have actually been regulating to living and thinking and operating just out of our lizard brain. We don't even get to access our prefrontal cortex because we've been neutered by our epigenetics. Next slide on epigenetics, Curtis. Curtis, okay. Epigenetics explains how early experience can have lifelong impacts. The genes children inherit from their biological parents provide information that guides their development. For example, how tall they could eventually become or the kind of temperament they have. Well, what if your parents have already been neurobiologically, don't even know that they've been, because of the nature and environment that they grew up in, that they've been compromised? And what about the fact that the white body supremacy is the culture that's actually telling us how to live? That's almost like the same thing like the Native Americans with the blankets, when they gave them the blankets with the smallpox in it. So when we're looking at our caregivers, our mothers, and the many bodies before us that make up our DNA, we've already been traumatized. Does that make sense, Curtis?
Yep.
Okay. And so it says, when experiences during development rearrange the epigenetic march that govern gene expression, they can change whether and how genes release the information they carry. So biologically, we're made up of many bodies, and our many bodies is our ancestry, and it's connected in our DNA. And so when you come out of your mother's womb and you spend that third trimester in her womb, you're actually picking up on everything that she does, all the conversations outside of the womb, all the conversations with your dad, with your grandmother, if she's smoking cigarettes, whatever type of food she's eating, all those things come directly in correlation in the womb, and even to the odor of your mom. And so it says, thus the epigenome can be affected by positive experiences such as supportive relationship and opportunities for learning, or negative influences such as environmental toxins or stressful environments. But how can we grow up like that if we're growing up in an environment where we have household trauma, environmental trauma, and community trauma? And so that's what they're talking about, the supportive relationship and opportunities for learning, or negative influences such as the environmental toxins or stressful life circumstances. So how many of your parents when you were growing up had livable wages? Or did they have enough time to actually parent you? Or did they know what they needed to do neurobiologically to parent you? But if they're coming from the white body supremacy culture, what does that tell you? And then you need to ask yourself, how come we was left behind? How come when they took us and when they enslaved us, they never brought none of our medicine with us, none of our diet with us? So we wake up underneath the white body supremacy, we actually just been kidnapped. That impacts our neurobiological DNA. And so it says, which leave a unique epigenetic signature on the genes. These signatures can be temporary or permanent, and both types affect how easily the genes are switched on or off. Recent research demonstrates that there may be ways to reverse certain negative changes and restore healthy functioning, but the best strategy is to support responsive relationships and reduce stress to build brains from the beginning. So what we need to do is create our own Black health and wellness silos. A lot of people don't understand that in actuality, in epigenetics, what's really important is our vagus nerve. We know less about the science, and that's the elephant in the room today when we talk about epigenetics and the vagus nerve. Next slide, please, Curtis. Young brains are particularly sensitive to epigenetic changes. I want everybody here to kind of put themselves in these shoes. Experiences very early in life when the brain is developing most rapidly cause epigenetic adaptations that influence whether and when and how genes release their instructions for building future capacity for health, skills, and resilience. And that's why it's crucial to provide supportive and nurturing experience for young children in the earliest years. How many people are parents in the room today and really think that they might need to update their parenting software? Is there anybody in the room like that? Yeah. So it says services such as high quality health care for all pregnant women, infants, and toddlers, as well as support for new parents and caregivers, can quite literally affect the chemistry around children's genes. And that's very important, the chemistry around children's genes. Does anybody in here know that in actuality, our vagus nerve is the biggest communicator? And so it says supportive relationships and rich learning experiences generate positive epigenetic changes, signatures that activate genetic potential. So when we come to the next slide, it talks about early development. The caregiver with traumatic experiences. So if your mother was having traumatic experiences with your dad, she's going to release cortisol. And then when the baby absorbs the cortisol through the placenta, it can impact the baby's HPA axis. Is there any science-minded people in here that know what the HPA means? No?
Not me.
Not you? HPA is the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenaline gland. In actuality, that's part of our central nervous system, and it's part of our limbic system, but the most important part of this is our autonomic nervous system, which controls all of the unconscious movements in our body. So when the caregiver struggles to regulate, she secretes that cortisol. And now the attachment relationship between the caregiver and the child may be strained because it impacts the child's development of core sense of self. Because if a mom is experiencing anxiety and depression, guess who gets transferred to? The baby. And then the ability to integrate experiences. So if your mom is struggling in real life, just communicating with anybody, with herself, with her peers, or if there's some more sibling, then it causes epigenetic expressions. Because now those chemicals is getting on your DNA inside the womb, and so they're changing the expressions of it. So when you're starting to grow and develop, it can turn you to all. It can open up a plethora of pathways, I'll say emotionally. And then it says the adulthood, a person who has had a caregiver with untreated trauma may be more prone to PTSD after trauma. How many people in here have got PTSD? How many people think they grew up with PTSD, or struggle to repair after a conflict? Some of the things that are impacting us in real life, you guys, is actually really going on, and we don't even know how to talk about it. And then it says struggle with relationships, unintentionally bring out negative behaviors in others, be emotionally detached, be more prone to disassociate. All this stuff started, you guys, before we even came into being here in the year 2020. And what's really important, you guys, is that the liver cancer I got, is they wanted me to have a liver transplant. But what happened actually was that they performed the procedure. And then when I found out after they performed the procedure and they told me there was no continuum of care program, that's when I started doing all this research, you guys, and finding out what was wrong with me. And why did I have cancer, and why do Black people have so many comorbid disorders? Next slide. Adverse childhood and community experiences can occur in the household. And that's the reason why, you guys, that cancer's in our families, and cancer's in my family, cancer's in your family, and we have high blood pressure, and we have diabetes. It all comes from the environment. When we grew up, and we grew up into slavery, that's when we first got compromised. All the beatings, everything in that environment that was bestowed upon us, we actually brought that into life into 2020. You don't see nobody else beating their kids but Black people. And when you look at it, the reason why a lot of the stuff has happened to us, we grew up in an environment where there's bullying, physical and emotional neglect, incarcerated family members, divorce, homelessness, parental mental illness, alcohol and drug abuse, emotional and sexual abuse. So when you grow up in a household like that, all that stuff is going to be in you. And then what about our community? Discrimination, historical trauma, substandard schools, lack of jobs, violence. All this stuff is already in us before we even come, just the environment that does it. We have a climate crisis, record heat and droughts, wildfires, smoke. We can look at our food. Next slide, please, Curtis. The vagus nerve. You guys really, this is really where my sweet spot is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, you guys, is what Resma was talking about in the book when he called it the soul nerve. And in many situations, our thinking brain is smart enough to be careful in a situation, but when there appears to be danger, our lizard brain may say to the thinking brain, screw you out of my way, we're going to fight, flee, or freeze. And that's what's going on with a lot of us today. When you look at the definition of the vagus nerve, the vagus nerve is involved in nearly every physiological action in the human body and can have an immediate and dramatic impact on our well-being. The vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve originating in the brain stem and traveling through, hold on, I gotta move you up, Curtis. And through the face, the neck, the lungs, the heart, the diaphragm, and abdomen, including the stomach, the spleen, the intestines, the colon, the liver, and the kidneys. And the vagus term is Latin for wander, an appropriate name for the longest cranial nerve in the body. So a lot of times, you guys, when you think that you're actually having a psychological problem, it's actually having a physiological problem. It's the environment that's doing all the triggering. And that's when I talked about the environment on the 3 realms of the ACEs, that household environment, the community environment, and the environment outside the home has impacted all these areas of our body. And that's the reason why we feel things in our stomach first. The metaphors abound for the vagus nerve, the superhighway of our body, transporting vital information between our brain and the rest of our internal organs. And also it's a symphony conductor directing how fast or slow or loud or quiet our nervous system will be at any given time. It's actually an air traffic controller too. Next slide, please. So on the left, we have the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs from our brain stem, as you can see in this infographic on the left-hand side, to our lungs, our heart, our liver, our spleen, our stomach, our pancreas, our gallbladder, our kidney, our large intestine, and small intestines. And on the right is a schematic of the vagus nerve, the actual vagus nerve. And so and I don't know, so I want to say right or left, but just walk with me here. And I believe it's on the right-hand side, we have our sympathetic nervous system. And on the left-hand side, we have our parasympathetic nervous system. On the right-hand side, the sympathetic nervous system, it consists of fight, flight, or freeze. And on the left, the parasympathetic nervous system is about rest and digest, but it's also where the vagus nerve is. The vagus nerve runs from our groin, as you can see, through those nerves there, and those are called visceral nerves, and what you can see there is they run all the way up to our brain. They supply 80% of information from our body to our brain, and the brain supplies another 20% information back down to our bodies. So I'm going to give you guys a definition on the reptilian brain. It's hard to talk about this, guys, unless I'm actually educating you first. So I'm assuming that a lot of people in here don't know much about the reptilian brain or the limbic system. So it's kind of hard. I'm kind of nerdy, so I kind of know all this stuff by heart. And the reason why I know it is because that a lot of people go about trying to change their behaviors. In actuality, it's not their behaviors that they need to change and focus on. They need to start looking at their physiology. You can't keep going over your cognition. Your cognition is not going to change it. What you have to do is, and that's the reason why I use a somatic model about the mind, body, and brain. So in order for you to understand your whole vagus nerve and your emotional system, you need to understand about your vagus nerve first and epigenetics. It's neuroscience, epigenetics, adverse childhood experiences, and resiliency. And it comes in that fashion and form. So in actuality, you know, what I want to explain to you guys from the beginning is that we was compromised when we was enslaved in Africa. When we were stolen in Africa and brought over here, and then we had the white body supremacy or the white body culture embedded into our lives, their ideology, and that was the supreme culture. It couldn't have been the supreme culture because back in those days, when in the days of Rome, Timbuktu was thriving. We had libraries, you know, we had the pyramids. So we need to understand where we come from in order to know our value today. So part of 2 programs that we have at the League of Extraordinary People that we're getting ready to enact is a reparenting program and a know your value program. And this part comes underneath to know your value. You know, how many of you guys went and bought a new car and left there and had to go back and go get the book? And so basically this is what's going on here, you guys. We got a car. We was born, but we was never raised, and we was never told or explained the values about being raised because we were slaves when we got here. So they knew, and they cut us off from our culture because when they stole us, you know, how many wise men did they have? You know, it wasn't like this was planned. So this was just like thievery. And so we came over here and we've absorbed their culture, and this culture is killing us. And so we need to know what we're made up of. So starting with the reptilian brain, I need to explain this to you. It's located at the base of the skull. So at the base of the skull, in the schematic on the right-hand side, is our reptilian brain. And at the base of the skull, the brain stem, hold on, I lost my place here, you guys. So starting with the reptilian brain, located at the base of the skull, in charge of all the human functions we do not have conscious control over. This is education, you guys. So really, and you're going to get this in a presentation afterwards. The brain stem regulates breathing, digestion, reflex responses, blood pressure, bowel, and bladder control. Did you hear that, you guys? I'm going to say this again, that we do not have conscious control over, and that's regulates our brain stem, regulates our breathing, digestion, reflective responses, blood pressure, bowel, and bladder control. The cerebellum, it coordinates balance, voluntary movements, and posture. And then our basal ganglia assists in coding procedural memory, routine behaviors that can be viewed as muscle memory, and houses the reward center of the brain that helps encode habitual behaviors and learns from conditioning and positive negative enforcers. And then the mammalian brain, the limbic system, housed in the midbrain, right above and between the brainstem. This part of the brain regulates human emotional responses and understanding of attachment. Overall, this part of the brain is involved in most of the typical trauma responses. The thalamus, linked with the brainstem, receives sensory input from the external world. This part of the brain is unique due to the activity involving all levels of the brain, the brainstem, the limbic system, and the prefrontal cortex. What I'm trying to get you guys to understand is no part in here does it say that we can change this with our talking brain. This is a bottom-up approach, you guys. We live in they've actually created a system of white body supremacy in a culture that needs to be really looked at, you guys, because that's what's the undergirding or the underlay or the underplay for what's going on with us today. They send us to therapists for stuff that we don't need therapy. We need to understand our anatomy. It's all about if you bought a car and you didn't get your book, then if you don't have the book, then you don't know what type of transmission fluid to put in, when to get an oil change. You don't know nothing about your motor. So if you don't know nothing about your motor and they know everything about the motor, that's just like, you know, they're talking about this hands-on, this autonomous driving where the car drives itself. They've been driving us with the white body supremacy culture. And then we've been taking and using that on our kids. The reason why our kids rebel is because we're not guiding and directing them. And so it's really, really important that we create our own curriculum, especially with Black health and wellness. You look up and down Rainier now, and they got all these residential places, and they're just studios. And down in the bottom part, They have their social workers. They have their mental health therapists, and they have their case managers, and they have a curriculum that's created by the white body supremacy. So they're directing everything, you guys. And so that's the reason why we run into people that are skin folks and not kin folks, because they don't know what kin folks is all about, because they don't understand the science, the anatomy. And so that's what the know your value part is. And so it says that hypothalamus regulates the autonomic nervous responses, and that's the sympathetic activation, and it increases in heart rate, and the parasympathetic decreases in the heart, and so that's the rest and body temperature and food intake. So when you're not sleeping accurately and you're not eating accurately, that's in your parasympathetic, you guys. And the only way that you can correct that if you know something about your vagus nerve. You got to bring your vagus nerve online. So when it talks about the amygdala is known as the fear center and has a direct link. And as a matter of fact, the amygdala and when you was in your mother's womb, that amygdala, which is a sponge, was developed at that time. It's the first of our bottom-up approach that's developed. And it's directly linked to the thalamus, which sends the amygdala sensory information to assess in order to determine if stimuli is safe or not. You know, what's really, really funny, you guys, is that our brain and body talks and speaks in 4 different ways. You know, and the first is the nervous center, and the next is the prefrontal, and the next is hormonal, pulse, and then we have electromagnetic, we have pulse, electromagnetic, and we have the nervous system. Depending on how the amygdala assesses information, this is really important, you guys, because a lot of us think that it's our thinking that actually impacts this. But it says, depending on how the amygdala accesses information, it sends signals to the hypothalamus to release specific hormones. For example, if an experience is pleasurable, it may send dopamine or a reward transmitter, or when around a loving caregiver, it may release oxytocin, a neurotransmitter which promotes bonding and attachment. It stimulates dangerous or unsafe. The amygdala will signal for the hypothalamus to release cortisol or adrenaline, which mobilizes fight, flight, and freeze and fawn response. And that's in the sympathetic nervous system. And then the hippocampus, which sits on top of the amygdala and helps the brain organize emotional experiences in the time and context, it sends information to the prefrontal cortex, shifting implicit responses to explicit memory. I want you guys to really understand here. Did you see how they had to go through the amygdala and then the hippocampus before it decides on whether to get it up to the prefrontal cortex? So if a lot of us have been programmed by nature or nurture to stay in that loop, stay in that survival brain because of our environment and those three ACEs that I showed before, then guess what? They've neutered us. They've neutered us by the type of impact. And so what the elephant in the room is science. So everybody's concerned about social media and they want the algorithms and the stats. That's what, you guys, they have been monitoring us scientifically and knowing exactly how to program us. We have been programmed by the white body supremacy culture model and curriculum in order to the outcomes that we have in our community today. And we don't even understand it. And so when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we need to talk about Black Lives Matter, not from just the systemic racism point, but the systemic racism in all policies, especially in healthcare and education. How can they charge you for not having a book when you bought the car? When you buy the car and you drive the car off the lot and you don't have a book in it, you can go back. But they don't even tell us that there was a book in the beginning so we can address and be able to make the necessary changes that we need in order not to be involved in addiction and not to be involved in mental health issues and challenges. They don't even tell us how our brain operates or functions or how our anatomy runs. You know, who wants to buy a car like that? And so lastly, the thinking brain or the cerebral cortex refers to the frontal lobes or outer layer of the brain, which separates humans from other mammals due to higher thinking, language, and emotional regulation. One of the last of the way the body and the brain communicates, you guys, is electromagnetically. And that's something that a lot of individuals really don't even talk about or even understand. And that's what we're all about. Our HPA, you guys, is our homeland security. And so the HPA encloses the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is unconscious. You don't even know that it's working. So in actuality, a lot of us are living on our limbic brain and our reptilian brains that don't even understand what's going on. And our information highway is the vagus nerve, and what my challenge is to start getting you guys to understand that you don't need to go see mental health therapists. What you need to do is start accessing some structural changes. You don't need to review all that nasty emotional stuff, you guys. You need to start working on building up your vagal tone. And so when you build up your vagal tone, Curtis is the and I don't think I put it in there, but there's a window of tolerance. And I don't have it in front of me. There's just a plethora of information, you guys. So instead of anxiety and depression, anxiety is when you're in the sympathetic state, and that's fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, and depression is when you're in your parasympathetic state, and that's part of the vagal nerve, and that's part of your dorsal vagal system. And then when you have an anxiety, that's part of your ventral vagal system. And so your ventral vagal system is your social engagement and connection, and it has to do with your face, and it has to do with your breathing. So in order for us to be able to calm ourselves down from anxiety, you can't talk yourself down out of a physiological problem because it's hormones and stuff being secreted. I just explained that to you. And so that's the stuff that's got you up and going out of your mind, and then your heart has already been compromised, your blood pressure, and then you're eating sugar, because you're trying to self-regulate yourself, you know what I mean? And you don't even understand what's going on. That's the underlay for the overplay, and then they have people like me, I'm a lived experience individual. I left home at 13, and so neurobiologically, I probably was about 5, because 13 is actually the age that your prefrontal cortex starts to develop, and it's not fully developed until the age of 25. There's so much to talk about here, Curtis. You don't even really, have the time. And so here you go here. I'm going to share something else here with you. It says that which separates humans from other mammals due to higher thinking. So lastly, the thinking brain, or our prefrontal cortex, you guys, refers to the frontal lobe or the outside layer of the brain, which separates humans from other mammals due to higher thinking, language, and emotional regulation. And so separating the right from the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere more directly linked to emotional brain, spatial learning, spatial reasoning, metaphorical thinking, nonverbal communication, and processing negative emotions. Did you hear me? That's your right hemisphere. Your left hemisphere is more connectedness to the prefrontal cortex. So that's the reason why you need to say, hold up, wait a minute, let me put some thought in it, because you need to get it across away from that lizard brain, that reptilian brain that says it's the first one that measures what's going on. And so if you're impulsive and compulsive, guess what? You're living in your lizard brain. And then nobody's told you how to update your software, and nobody especially ain't trying to tell you about how to update some black software, because we're already a threat. We're inventors, we're the visionaries, we're the ones that got all these electronics and stuff going. And so it says that to the prefrontal cortex, where the analyzing logic, verbal communication, integrated positive emotions, and organized sequencing our life experience in a coherent narrative. They haven't told us anything about that. Then our dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex is involved in working memory, decision-making, planning, insight, awareness, and relational to the external surroundings, And then it says medial prefrontal cortex directly linked to emotional regulation and impulse control, receives input from the limbic systems, specifically the amygdala and hippocampus, to form explicit memories and house conclusions, decisions based on our past experiences. However, when the emotional brain is highly active, the prefrontal cortex is unable to access the executive functioning. Okay, and so it says, for example, the term he flipped out is referring to emotional brain taking over responses and hindering the prefrontal cortex to assist with regulation. So let me stop right here, Curtis. because all this stuff is really important to me, and I'm real passionate about this stuff, you guys, and especially about the Black people. Black lives matter, but it needs to matter in the healthcare realm first. And so me and my business partner, we bought 1.5 acres out in Federal Way, and we want to build a Black health and wellness residential program, you know, with behavioral health on the bottom. And this is why, because we don't even have the basic necessary. You guys are running down the street talking about Black Lives Matter, man. But just guess what, man? If you don't know what your engine is, how you know how Black Lives Matter? You know what I mean? Because if you don't know how your anatomy is, you don't know how to fire the ship. You can't tell your kids what's really going on, what really went wrong. You know, then how do Black Lives Matter, man? The elephant in the room is a science, and I've been saying this forever, ever. You know what I mean? And we really need to do this on a different level, you guys. It ain't about the money, because that ain't the honey. You understand what I'm saying? We need to work with our people and get them to understand what they're working with in the first place. You know what I mean? And that the amygdala, the hippocampus, you know, what they mean. And so when they go to school, that they know about the vagus nerve, and that they know that they can increase their vagal tone. And so they got yoga exercises, you guys, and breathing exercise, so we can improve our vagal tone, so we can get out of that survival realm, that reptilian brain shit. We can calm ourselves down. And so we just need to make structural changes, you guys. And so if you don't know who you are, you don't know, the first thing you want to do when you get on a new car, jump on the freeway and just mash. You know what I mean? And so if you don't know what kind of engine you got, how you gonna mash? You know, you don't know how your family's been damaged. You won't even know what to look out for. This is simple, you guys. You guys are going to these therapists for the wrong things. What you need is information and education. You don't need to go in there and tell Ray, Pookie, and Shaniqua about your business. They already know what the outcome is. You know, and then you get up every morning and you look at it, you know, do some simple breathing exercises, some yoga exercises, you guys, you can calm down. You need to start taking that medication. The medication wasn't for us. We need the Black healers. And we need to also work on our diet and our physiology. Our physiology is causing our psychology, you guys. It's not our psychology causing our physiology. You guys need to understand, we was created from the bottom up, not from the top down. You know, and so remember this, that the heart communicates with the brain and the bodies in 4 ways: neurological, the nervous system; biochemical, the hormones; biophysical, the pulse wave; and energetic, the electromagnetic fields. In actuality, I'm challenging you guys we need to start an educational program about this, so we can teach our community to know their value. Curtis?
Yes, sir. You ready for some Q&A?
Yeah, I don't know how much time, because I get involved and I get scattered and going all around, but there's all kinds of plethora of information that I have, research that I've done on this, you know, because I've been fighting for my life with this liver cancer. And then, you know, before then, I don't know if it's, but, you know, I swallowed a 1/4 ounce of crack cocaine and died and was paralyzed. You know, I'm resilient. You know, anybody that leaves home at 13, you know, I slept underneath the tree on 23rd and Republican the first night, you know, that I ran away from home. So we don't have to run no more. We don't have to treat our children like they're not our children. And we don't have to treat them with white body culture neither. We need to go and seek out the culture of our ancestors. And we need to embolden our people through information. We don't need to keep asking people for money to find out how to live.
So you ready for the Q&A? Great presentation.
Yeah.
Amazing presentation. Thank you for that. And then you ready for Q&A now?
Yeah.
Okay. So just go ahead, unmute yourself, and I have at it. I know there was a lot there and a lot to digest, to process.
Yeah, the first question that came up for me was about epigenetics in general, because like I heard about the idea before from like the book, I forget what her name is that wrote it, but post-traumatic slave syndrome.
That's Dr. Joy DeGruy.
Dr. Joy DeGruy, yeah. So I heard about it from there first, and I remember I was in a class with this was an Asian woman professor, and I brought up epigenetics when we were talking about race and racism and whatnot, and she sort of had issue with epigenetics. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on like because her concern was basically that like it's possible for epigenetics to be used to sort of like justify some of like the racism and or racist ideas and whatnot, like in terms of like this idea of like the Black community having sort of a genetic predisposition as a result of like slave trauma and whatnot to like be predisposed to like criminality and all this other bullshit, right, that we hear all the time again. And it's just another sort of potential justification for that. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. That was like the first thing that came to mind as you were talking about.
Yeah, you know, man, I just consider the source. That's all, man. You know, Dr. Joy DeGroove and every other researcher that I have, we got it on point. Resma's book, My Grandmother's Hands, man. You know, that's just another person that bought into that white body supremacy culture. You know what I mean? You know, if you read the books that you want to read, of course you're going to have the thoughts you want to have. You know what I mean? And so that's what's going on now, that we've been reading the books they want us to read. You know what I mean? You know, one thing that happened to them was the internet. You know what I mean? So, you know, they took control of electricity. And so electricity then took control of us. You know what I mean? And so how you manage that electricity inside and outside of your body is dependent on how it's going to manage you. So just like I told you today, Megley, I'm going from the bottom up, you know what I mean? And they want to counsel you from the top down. So what kind of sense does that make? You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah, sure. You get neutered by the information that you gather.
That makes a lot of sense.
So, but I mean, this is why, King, that was my first question as well. You know, where does that, you know, does your experiences say that you're predisposed to certain behaviors, you know, and pathologies? Is that, because I didn't hear a clear response to that. Is that the flip side of that argument could be used if we're saying based on these experiences, we need certain, I would think, interventions, but then is that saying without those interventions, and for them, the intervention is jail, you know, that's what they're saying. Oh, well, this kid came from this, his mother was on drugs, you know, this, that, and the third, he's most likely to commit a crime. Was that, they had a movie about that, saying that before. I forgot what movie that was, but you understand what I'm saying, right?
Right, and so guess what? It's that schematic that I showed you of the environment, the community. And
Can you go back to that slide?
Yep.
That was a good one.
It's the three realms of ACEs. Right there. So White King, when they get in a household and they're around divorce, homelessness, incarcerated family member, physical, emotional neglect, that whole message inside that home gets embedded in their DNA. And that's nature versus nurture. So that's the nature part of it. And so, you know, and the nurturing that we were supposed to have here on that tree is not there. And that's what I'm talking about.
You got that shit, nigga? No. You got the coronavirus. Let me find out, bro.
Hey.
You gotta stay in your room, bro.
I would like to add some input here as well. And just if
somebody's got their mic on that probably shouldn't have the mic.
I got it. I got it turned off.
Sound like they was going through an adverse child experience.
that first in the household.
the ACEs. So I would like to just add and say that I think that we really have to consider the fact that the epigenetics and the ACEs, like, yes, these things are indicators for what can happen with a person and the different responses or reactions that happen, but that it's not just the Black body, that there are all different bodies with different experiences. Yeah, with adverse experiences. But the problem is that when we're in a structure that has white bodies as the supreme standard by which all bodies shall be measured and Black bodies as the exact opposite of that, the responses to that is going to be very different, especially when it is in a top-down colonial, punitive, criminalizing way. And so that is, I think that's the part that has to be addressed right there, is that, you know, as a human body and as a collective, like that whole system of allowing white bodies to create the standard and the responses and to have all of the structural responses to what happens with the human body, that right there is the problem that has to be changed and shifted. So And I think, you know, yeah, it does lead for a lot of Black and brown bodies to still end up, you know, being further criminalized and punished for things that are in the body, but that's because of this current structure. And so that part has to have a shift and a change, where incarceration isn't the first thing that happens when, you know, a 14-year-old makes a mistake, because his brain isn't even fully developed and he don't even know how to cope with all the different things that are happening.
And he never learned none of those self-regulation skills at home, because it was never mirrored at home in that household environment. So when you look at the household environment, the community environment, and the environment outside, and you add wages in there, you never learn self-regulation. And so it's hard to do something when you've never been shown nothing before. And all you've seen was white body supremacy. Now you guys see why Nyla's on the team. You know what I mean? That when you get older, your amygdala and your hippocampus start shrinking, and that's where your memory's at. And so you guys, we're on an attack, and nobody knows it. And it comes through the environment and household products. It comes through the environment and food product, and it comes in the environment by white body supremacy, white body culture. You know, and so now we're standing down the bottom looking up, and we're thinking and operating out of our limbic brains, our reptilian brains. You know, we're not even having time because there's so much stress, and we haven't even talked about the toxic stress and the chronic toxic stress. And then we have to remember we're a body of many bodies. Nobody's even mentioned that. So your DNA is the 400 years of slavery, the 400 years of oppression. You know, so you walk outside, you're not walking outside as Alfred, you know, Nyla or Joaquin. You know, we're a representation of our journey, our heritage. And so we need to stand up in our communities. It's not about money. That's what they're strung on. When you look at this stuff, it's about good order, direction, and it's about living in love and respect and kindness and mercy and grace, you know? And we need to embed this into our community. We need to create our own social media. We need to create our own curriculums for these buildings. And we need to start building our own buildings and putting our own Black healthcare teams in there and having our own urgent care. We need to start doing everything. We can't sit back and let them keep saturating the minds of our community, especially our children, with this garbage. And not unless we take a look at it from this perspective, from the science, from the body up, and we keep going with this top-down thing, we keep supporting their image. They keep supporting their image. We didn't come here for that. We're children of God, and we're acting like we're children of man. You know, we got to take this racism out of this stuff here, you guys.
Joaquin, another thought. Oh, somebody else gonna say something? Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just gonna, sorry, now I done lost my train of thought. No, I was just gonna say that I think, you know, one of the things that Resma really talks about as well is, like, you know, yes, this internalized ideology and philosophy of white bodies being the supreme standard by which all bodies shall be measured has to be unlearned by other Black bodies, and that white bodies are going to have to do their own work, right? Because when we're looking at the history of how those white bodies got here, they're coming from their own traumas too, and a lot of those horrendous brutalities that they went and practiced on the rest of the world were also practiced on them, right? And so that's how they perfected it. Was they said, okay, this has been done to us to control and to dominate. Now here's how we're gonna use these different things to do that to others. And so so they have their own thing that they're gonna have to deal with. But for speaking specifically for Black bodies and other you know, brown bodies, I think that we are going to have to undo the colonial limited ways for which we think things need to be done. And a part of that is through that Sankofa effect of reaching back to find out what were those traditions, what were those cultures that we can hold tight to, and then also to even look during the slave era and say what particular forms of resource were being used by them, even in that form of constriction and control, to get us to this point. and that lives within the body, and that we can sense that, we can feel that, we can use that as a vibratory language for how to move ourselves, because we already have the indicators that let us know when there's danger, let us know when there's an opportunity for some relief or for some reprieve or another way to go about things. And so that's another really important piece. Is it's as simple as a hum. It's as simple as rocking the body, right? It's as simple as that right? Like we automatically do that because there were times where that's all we could do was rock. That's all we could do was that's all we could do was sing, right? Like in that moment, not to say in the whole picture, because there were many different ways that we went about this, but just to say that as we tap into that we realize that is a part of culture. And because white bodies are the supreme standard by which all bodies are currently measured in this structure, they make things that are natural to us seem like they are unacceptable and not okay, because there's this very limited thing that's acceptable based on that standard. So yeah, so I just wanted to add that, and I'll pause.
Okay, thank you, Nyla. You know, it's so this is huge, you guys. You know, because doing the work in the community, you know, we can get caught up in that part of it. But this is the real work here. This is the underlay for the overplay. We need to dig these trenches. And why, King, you know, I've been on this healthcare kick for a long time, because healthcare and education, but it's not healthcare and education. It's just straight up about information. You know what I mean? And so they're not sharing that information with us. And then subsequently, in actuality, they never wanted to share that information with us, because in actuality, we are the cash crop. They used us for the cash crop, you guys. Us getting addicted, they knew the outcomes of being addicted. If you look at the Monahan report that was developed in 1965, they created a community of learned helplessness. They took the black man out of the homes, they kept the black man out of the homes, and that's the reason why the kids are like they are. So in 1965, they stopped black men from welfare women. They couldn't stay with a man. And so they broke up the households. And that was a federal law. That was a federal law. And then we turned into an institutionalized nation. And so they put social workers and caregivers that carrying that white body supremacy into every office of our community, with the food stamp office, the welfare office. They put people in there to take the black man out of the picture and to disjoin our family. We was their cash crop, because remember, we didn't start to vote until 1965, you know, and then they know in 2035 that there'll be more black and brown people in this country, in America. And so they know it's over. So you guys, we need to get ahead of this curve. You understand what I'm saying? And start educating and empowering our people, because we need to develop wealth. They stole our wealth. In actuality, the ACE study is a study that actually the ACE study is the study that's the foundation for reparations, if you want to look at it, because it's the science behind, this whole thing that's going on to us. And so when you look at the application of it, we've just been programmed. And so what we need to do is deprogram our community, and also to allow them to deprogram, because what's going on with this 73 million people that voted for Trump is that they're not rich, but they have white privilege, and they want to hold that white privilege. And they're actually being suppressed by the same experiences that we are being suppressed to. And the only thing that they don't understand is that they're in the same boat. And nobody didn't look at it too. Trump talked about they was going to address addiction. They didn't do nothing about addiction, because the war is on America, and the war is on people caught up in homelessness, mental health, and actually in diet and healthcare.
Real quick, that's why I can't. You sound far away. I can't really hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay, so can we let Jennifer go, because she's been waiting to make a statement or ask a question for a while.
Okay.
And then I can get you after.
I just wanted to say one good morning. I was late, and just thank you, Mr. White, first of all, for what you're offering. The the little bit that I caught is where my studies have been in myself. I want to just add, or one, I want to ask if, I don't know if you already talked about the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, I have it right here on my desk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Already talked about that. So that,
right.
That's coming into a huge part of my healing. I was in a very almost fatal car accident this year, and in starting to study about the vagus nerve and the vagus response, got to some deeper levels of healing because it brought up so much old trauma. And the second thing being something I'm learning to talk about now to reduce shame around it is that I have fibroid tumors. And it's been a deep mismanagement through the medical industrial complex of that. The only thing that they recommend for it is a hysterectomy. And the anger that it induces in them when you refuse a hysterectomy, it made me run from the doctor and not go back and understand that my healing had to come communally, traditionally, through my ancestors and through my people, because they pretend that there is no link between being a Black African-American woman, the fibroids, and historical trauma. And so as I've started to dive into this study and see the way the toxins need to be released from my body, and not just the dietary toxins, the emotional toxins, the social toxins, it's just become a part of my force to keep, one, my body intact, to keep my organs inside of my body. The fight for it becomes very real. And so I just really want to say thank you, and how much I appreciate the depth that this conversation is going to, and that it's expanding beyond the accumulation of money, because that to me is part of the sickness. It doesn't mean anything to build this money if your insides aren't well, because you won't be here to use it. So thank you to all of you.
Jennifer, thank you, because I'm caught up in the struggle. So I have fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, and this liver cancer. And so I'm doing the hydrotherapy. I'm doing all this healing stuff. I got my ball. I got the massage balls for my face, my neck, and I do them 35% food grade hydrogen peroxide soaks and stuff. And so, and then I also know that my memory's messed up and my sequential verbiage is messed up, and I too have to do all the same things you do, because in actuality, that's from the energy inside us. See, they don't tell us how our engines run and operate, and so that's anxiety and depression that causes them fibroids. You dig what I'm saying? Because it's not allowing our blood to flow. And so when we don't, so they never even told us that we need to learn how to self-regulate ourselves, and so on the east side, they got all these opportunities and stuff because they're following the science, but they don't even tell us that the science is even involved in none of this stuff. And so I really, really am grateful that I met somebody with a healing, the Tubman Center, and they got a healing program, especially for Black people of color, because we can't approach it with medicine. I don't even fool with medicine no more. I go to organics, and when they get to talking about that medicine, I find another way out.
So, Alfred, can we answer some more questions or take some more statements? White King.
Well, I just wanted to highlight when we talking into the genetics, that our genetics didn't begin with the experience of being enslaved, right? So, also, what about our, did that delete everything and replace everything, or is that greatness and that power that has allowed us to even survive that most horrendous experience still within us too? Because I just think that, like just from Africa Town, we come from an asset-based perspective and not a deficit-based perspective, meaning that we have these challenges, but we do have the resources within us and among us to rise above the challenges, So I just wanted to see, bring that forward for consideration also, and that, the experiences that we are still having that are, positive can affect us too. So that's all. I mean, if we've been on the planet for millions or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands, whatever number you start at, that has to have some, weight in our position also, right?
Joaquin, you standing in it, man. Me and you been around the block. That in itself is the greatness right there, man, that we're kings, man. You know what I mean? I lived out on the streets for 38 years, shooting dope and smoking crack, man, and came back and got a master's, man. And now we're sitting across talking to you. We talking about on this level, man, on the science. So that goes to show you, man, the greatness ain't gone, man. You know what I mean? It's in us. It's not on us. And they want to try to make like it's on us, man. But no, the greatness is in us, White King. That's why we're still standing, man. And that's the reason why we're messengers of the spirit of the truth, man.
There's a saying that Resma says that he reminds people, and he just says it's protective, not defective. Right? Like these are different forms of protective measures, not defective measures. And the only reason why we see things as being defective or broken or needing to be fixed is because of that structural standard that is constantly reconditioning us to think that there's something wrong with us, when in reality, the system is working exactly as it's meant to do.
Right. Right. Remember, we're working from a higher source. We're not working from a source of man. We're working from a source of energy. We're just balls of energy having human experiences. Next question, Curtis.
Is there anybody else with any questions or comments? Anything you want to add or include or share?
I got a quick one. I had to step out for a second, but we talked a lot about the vagus nerve, and you mentioned things like yoga being helpful. What are some other things that we can do to address our vagus nerve through our body?
And you know, I have a, hold on. Here we go here. So here's some other things here. Cold exposure, deep, slow breathing, singing, humming, chanting, and gargling, probiotics, meditation, omega-3 fatty acids, exercise, massage, socialize, and especially laughing, okay? And you don't have to be controlled by your body and mind. You have the power to tell them all what to do. By stimulating the vagus nerve, you can send a message to your body that it's time to relax and de-stress, which leads to the long-term improvements in mood, well-being, and resilience. Increasing my vagal tone has allowed me to overcome anxiety and depression and better manage them when they arise. Did that help?
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you so much. That was super helpful.